Right. Professor Kevin Curry, good morning to you, Professor. Nice to speak to you as always.
Good morning, Greg.
And people will know you as Professor of Cybersecurity at Ulster University. Now, we're talking about a rarity, and that is the massive global company Apple giving a revenue warning. What's going on?
Yeah, they warned their investors that the revenue for the last 3 months of 2018 would not live up to previous estimates, really. And as a result, again, their stock price is down 8%. Again, this is a company which was expected to make 90 billion in revenue, but they only made 80 billion. And of course, they have 255 billion in cash in the bank. So, I mean, no one's really weeping for them. But really, it's just the fact is that global smartphone sales have stalled. And Apple, of course, that part of this fall, they're attributing it to the poor sales in China. So it turns out that in China, people don't want a $1,000 phone, but analysts had predicted this. And again, that Donald Trump's trade wars with China, where he's trying to impose tariffs and increase them from 10% to 25%, that has also not helped Apple at all.
Apple have a tendency to, some would say, feels like, dictate to their customer base what the customer base want. There have been some controversial decisions like removing a headphone jack and other kind of stuff. Would that have an impact on sales, or is it the fact that, that there are, good handsets out there that people can get and they say, well, maybe the Apple brand doesn't carry the kudos it did once?
One of the major things as well, which analysts had said, and they expected this fall in revenue to occur, was that people are not holding on to phones or not getting rid of phones like they did in the past. The average trend in the past with iPhones was every 2 years. It turns out now that the average iPhone owner keeps them for about 3 years, and that's due to a number of reasons. Again, that even last year there was a controversy over Apple slowing down iPhone 6s, for instance, the older iPhones, because, again, they came out and said that they were doing it for the protection of the battery. But it turns out then that people became more au fait with this, and they learned that they can just simply replace their batteries for about €30. So, again, a lot of people did this, that they realized that, hang on, when my battery performance is really bad, which does happen to old phones have a number of recharge cycles that they go to, that they can only do. So people learned that they could actually replace the battery, and that is actually one thing that they did. They've also found out that people now know that there's no joy. There's the joy that we would have had a number of years ago in moving to a new phone. That is gone, because now really most of your phones still open Facebook, okay, they take good pictures. There is very little difference when you get a new phone in your hands. So people are finding that their phones are lasting longer for them. They're doing just as much, and it's now just become something that you just have to have, that no one really looks at your phone and goes, wow, look at you, how great you are. Everyone's phone looks the same. And this was always going to happen to Apple.
Yeah, and I do wonder too, and this is only a theory of mine, Kevin, interested in your opinion, that I am an Android user, so maybe I'm somewhat biased, but just with smart homes now, with the smart speakers, the Google homes at a low price point, smart bulbs now becoming smart sockets and all this kind of stuff, that I just wonder, as Android and Google and that side of things become just easier and handier, because you seem to hear far more from them than you would say, for instance, Apple and its smart speaker and its connectivity. It has difficulty connecting with certain services and this kind of stuff. In other words, a phone now is not just simply what we use just the phone for. It's so much more. Are Apple behind the curve, do you think, in that level of integration, or am I a million miles off the mark?
No, not at all. And it's not as if they've made any horrendous mistakes. I mean, of course, the big loss for Apple in the last number of years has been the death of Steve Jobs, the iconic CEO of the company, really, who made wonderful decisions, really, and turned it into the first trillion-dollar company the world has ever seen. What has happened in the meantime, however, is that the Android phone makers, especially the Chinese ones like Xiaomi and Huawei, have come out with phones which are even, surpass Apple's iPhone XS, and they're at a lower price. They cost a lot less. So people are realizing this, of course, the market, and they're realizing that possibly they don't need this iPhone, and they are moving, of course, because but there's also people who bought into the iPhone ecosystem, because when you're in there, there's people who have Macs and they have their Apple TV and their iPads, and are able to move across the services quite smoothly. And of course, the iPad is still a wonderful device, but iPad tablet sales have really dropped again, because people are getting, their screens getting bigger in the phones, are using them just as much. Apple make a mistake, of course, like the home assistants are really one of the successes in modern, the Amazon Alexa, the Google Home, and Apple have their own HomePod, and that's been a failure, really. Now, they didn't bring that out to be a direct competitor, but they don't really have a smart voice assistant.
And their watches are ugly. I don't mean this fun. I don't mean that badly, by the way. I'm not having a go, but people now, I've got an Android watch on my wrist, and it's got a round face. It looks like a regular watch. I think iPhone watches are ugly, and they're rectangular or they're square. I just think that maybe they didn't think all of this through.
I agree. I do not like that watch, and I would never wear it. I totally agree. Again, because a lot of it is the Steve Jobs visionary, the genius that he was. He really made the right decisions, and they've made an awful lot of decisions. And even there, they came along with this newer smart Apple Watch, and they touted all the features of it. The fact that it had an ECG capabilities, able to tell if you were going to have a heart attack and everything else. And then the FDA came along and said actually that the feature doesn't always work. So there's been mistakes along the way there. It's hard to see where they go. Because that the Chinese problem will not go away, really. And the way that they've got any increase in revenue from iPhone sales is by increasing the price of the more expensive items, because literally they're not selling as many iPhones as they used to. Now, one thing, they do make a lot of money, from the services, and that's the iTunes purchases, the app purchases, They take 30% off the premium every time someone buys an app. They have Apple Music subscriptions. They're trying to move into being a Netflix competitor as well, so we'll see how that will go, because that requires a lot of money. But of course, like I said, they have $255 billion in the bank, and they have a lot of smart people working for them. So of course that they will be trying everything they can to return to the top, because at the moment they're being superseded by Microsoft and Amazon.
Yeah. Now, obviously, this is bad news for Ireland, because people might think we're just talking about tech here. But I think last year's estimate was that a quarter of GDP growth in Ireland was down to Apple product sales, because they effectively push through their profits and pay tax on the profits outside of the Americas. The rest of the world goes through Ireland. Our balance books are going to sort of strike even this year based on Apple money. If Apple have a bad year, next year we end up with negative GDP. That's how reliant we as a country are on this company that makes phones.
Yes, although they are still a really strong company. They're one of the top. They're one of the FANGs, as we say, the five giants of the internet, which is Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, and Google. I think that they will have other products. There's rumors that they will release a VR headset, a virtual reality headset. We do expect a voice assistant coming out, and before we know it, usually around March they release something else. They might have a killer product again, and of course they still have the Apple ecosystem with the services the iTunes subscriptions, the apps So they will be having a steady income from that which is about the 40 billion mark. And I think they will address the Chinese issue again, but really, it's really what matters. What really will tell is the next iteration of the iPhone. What type of iPhone will it be? How will it appeal to the market? What price will it be pitched at? But of course, it's really hard to see, because the technology world moves on very quickly, and people, if they sense that they're getting better revenue elsewhere, even though we call people Apple fanboys, but people will move on very quickly if they feel that they're getting value for money elsewhere. So Apple do have to be careful about how they see the future again. But there's also a lot of money in the cloud services industry. I know it's a boring term for people, but again, Amazon and Microsoft have really taken advantage of that. So Apple might do something in that market as well. But
they're chasing now. It's funny, Kevin, when I hear you speaking, it's almost like they're chasing, though, as opposed to being the trailblazers. Is that because they lost some of those key important players right at the top of the company, that it was they that were pushing the envelope, rather than saying, hold on a second, VR's taken taken off there. Cloud service has taken off there. Do people really want to download physical songs onto their to their items? I know there are alternatives, but it's peculiar that we're talking about. And I'm not putting words in your mouth, Professor, but Apple chasing rather than leading.
Definitely. There's been quality issues that never happened in Steve Jobs' day. There's been like a touch bar issue. Their MacBook, again, their laptop, which is quite expensive, again, really had a lot of faults with it, with the keyboard again, with that it was like literally you could not repair the keyboard again. It was really, really annoying people who were loyal, hardcore Apple fans for
Drop
years.
Drop your phone and the fingerprint sensor's gone. As well. Things like that, yeah.
There was a lot. There was a bendy phone again that even there last week, even they're saying some of the new iPads are coming and they're bent, and they're saying that that's the design feature. Again, there's been a lot of quality issues that never happened in Steve Jobs' day, and they can only do so many of them before people start to, lose faith, really. And again, when I listen to my technology podcast again all the time, I just hear grumble after grumble from long time Apple fans about products. And of course, as you said, that the removal of the headphone jack really annoyed people again, because of course, people have to go and get AirPods again, and there's very few people who have these little AirPods, the wireless the wireless headphones you put into your ears. Again, you might see people.
A lot of us have funny ears, Kevin, that won't actually hold in regular headphones, let alone these pods. You'd be astonished how many people have funny ear holes. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's kind of true,
Oh, no, you're dead right. I find that when I got one particular set of headphones when I'm running,
that will stay in.
Exactly, I find it very hard again. So people are losing these. In other words, that when you were buying the iPhone XS and you had to buy the AirPods with that and everything else, really people were paying about €1,600 last year. Again, so there's only, there's not that many people, especially with the Chinese economy, which they're relying on for 15% of their revenue. Again, with that much money in their pocket, willing to splash out, especially when you have top quality Android rivals, really, just making phones which are a lot cheaper.
What is that woo-woo phone? I saw some pictures. Michelle here has one of those, some pictures taken at the Christmas party. The camera on that phone is just unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it, and something as simple on the face of it as a camera and what you can reproduce is enough to make people switch a brand. Simple as that. Like, that's how, how fluid we can be now as customers.
Very, very much, yeah. I mean, yeah, the camera really is one of the most, important features now for most people, again, that we all want to look our best on Instagram and what we share, again, and the camera can be a killer feature, and there are better cameras. Even the Google phone itself, the Pixel, would be superior to the Apple iPhone cameras. Having said that, I will say that there's things that still get right, and the camera in the iPhone X, for instance, it really is a good camera. Excellent. But of course, I'm even nearly conflicted because there are other phones out there which are really equally good cameras, if not better, in certain low light conditions as well. But they still make a good product, and I must admit, the iPad is still a wonderful tablet again. Now, there are frustrating features on it, of course, again, but it's just that, again, you're paying more for an iPad again. And if I think about when I recommend to friends what to get, I'm always recommending that they get an Android, they get an Android tablet, that they get another feature. The only time I tell people to stick within the iPhone is when that they already have it and they're used to it, and that they're maybe not a technological person. Then remain within the system. But otherwise, there are better value products out there, and I think most of the world is beginning to realise that.
All right, Kevin, great stuff as always. Thank you so very much indeed. Professor Kevin Curran, Professor of Cybersecurity at Ulster University.